What's up? In this tutorial, we are going to cover how to set up the Aziel Arts landscape material to use landscape layers for painting or to be driven by texture mask. First thing I'll do is probably make a new material from the existing master here. So I'll right click on it and choose create material instance. I will call this MI for material instance, landscape, and material, and then I'll do underscore paint layers. Not pane layers, paint layers. All right, and we'll go ahead to our landscape and drag that on to our landscape. Next, we'll double click that material instance to open it, and let's set up our layers here. So for right now, I will keep landscape grass off. We can always turn that on later. The main thing we want to do here is come to use landscape paint layers and turn that on. When you do this, your landscape should turn black because now it's looking for layer information instead of just using a standard auto material input. And you can see also that I have multiple numbered layers turned on here, so I can turn on however many landscape layers I would like to use. So we'll go ahead and use layer 1 and layer 2. So I'll do 2 landscape layers. Now, within each of these landscape layers, I also have the option to have them use slope mask. So each landscape layer technically is its own little auto material. So we can have 2 different sets of textures that drive our flat areas and our sloped areas that are still our paintable landscape layers. I'm gonna keep my snow layer off and my use separate for our texture off for now. So I just have my layer 1 and layer 2 enabled. Next, let's go over to our drop down here and choose landscape, and we'll come over to our paint layers tab. It gives us 2 options here to manually create a layer or to auto assign all the landscape layers that it finds in our material. I don't recommend using this auto layer setup because more often than not, I find that it creates the correct layers, but it assigns the wrong layer information to those layers automatically, and that's very hard to remove those layers, or you have to copy them, or it just creates a little more complexity than we actually need. So the way I recommend approaching to create your landscape layers is just to go ahead and manually create whatever landscape layers you would like to use. The way we do that is we go ahead and hit the plus button, and I'll make 2 layers because we're using layer 1 and layer 2. Now, the only thing we need to do here to get these to read our landscape materials layers is name them the exact same thing that's listed here. So layer 01, layer 02, or layer puddle. Those are the options for what we can put here as the name of the layer. If we use that exact same layer name, it will point to that layer in the landscape material. So I'll go ahead and double click on this layer 1 name to rename it, and it will be capital layer 01, no spaces. And now it recognizes automatically that it's related to layer 1 of my material, and I'll go ahead and do that for the second layer. I'll double click on the name here, and we'll call it capital LAYER02, and you can see that that picks up the layer as well. So now we just need to make layer information that can save our painting or imported textures into. So we'll go ahead and hit the plus button here and choose weight blended layer. And this will go ahead and make a new landscape layer info for this particular level using this particular material. So we'll go ahead and hit save. And when you do that for your layer 1, the debug textures that I have as part of the material will show up. And then we'll go ahead and add layer information for layer 2. We'll hit save. Great. So if we went ahead and painted layer 2, we wouldn't actually see any change here because they're both of the same textures. So now what I need to go do is come over to my textures dropdown, and you can see I have texture inputs for layer 1 and layer 1 slope. So that's the layer 1 of the flat areas and then layer 1 of the sloped areas. We don't want to use slope inputs. We could go ahead and turn that off up here, like I mentioned, which would get rid of these texture inputs, but I would like to use them because I find it gives a more natural look. So I have layer 1 and layer 1 slope texture inputs, and then I have layer 2 and layer 2 slope. And that's because I turned on layer 1 and 2 here in the landscape layer setup up here. So I'll contract that, and we'll go ahead and we'll drag in some textures. So I'll add some textures for layer 1. So we'll come over to my material, and you can use your own textures. I have a tutorial as well on how to put your own textures in, but I'm going to use some of the ones that come with the material. So I'll add a grass here for layer 1, and we'll use the height normal, and occlusion roughness. And you can see these are these sloped areas. So I'll go ahead and expand the slope area, and we'll go ahead and add a rock. I'll use the white rock textures. I'll plug in the color, height, normal, and occlusion roughness metallic. Oops, I dropped that in the wrong one. Great. At this point, I would probably jump over to my texture breakup and turn on texture breakup on my close and my far textures to help these textures not look like they're repeating so much. I will also come over to the texture size here, and I'll expand layer 1 and layer 1 slope, and I'll modify these. So I think my near textures could be smaller, so I'll make that as 0.1. And I think the grass here could be 0.5, and there you go. That gives us a much more natural look here. All right, so now let's talk about layer 2. So if we can go ahead and paint layer 2 by clicking on the layer and lowering our brush size here, and we could go ahead and start painting in layer 2. Or if we wanted to go ahead and import a texture to drive layer 2, we could go ahead and right click on it and choose import from texture file, in which case we could choose layer section here, and we could choose the layer that we want to import here, and I could choose layer 2, and I could look for a mask texture to drive this. For example, I could use this line here to drive the placement of my layer 2. So if I go ahead and hit open and then choose the import type as resample, so that it resamples this texture size to the size of my landscape, and then go ahead and hit import and hit OK. Now it has gone ahead and added and used that layer as a mask. So then I could go ahead into layer 2 and import some separate textures for layer 2. So let's go over to our textures. Let's add some sand. So I'll add some sand into my layer 2 here. And for my slope, I'll add a slightly different rock. And there we go. Now we have a sand blending into a grassland. And even if I've imported it, I can continue to go and paint on my layer 2 here to add additional layers of sand. All right, so when we're using landscape layers and we're also using ground cover grass, if I turn ground cover landscape grass on and I let it load here, when I have that on, it will go ahead and look for layer 1, and by default, it will place itself only on layer 1. But if we want to adjust that, we can come down here to the ground cover section, and we have checkboxes here for each layer. So by default, it's here. The rocks and grass are present on layer 1. On layer 2, we could come over and just have rocks turn on here. Now there's just going to be rocks in the sand areas, which is awesome. Or if I wanted to turn grass on, I could do that as well. So by default, each of these standard layers can accept textures. You can also use a puddle layer. So if I use my puddle layer here and I come back over to my landscape layers and we add a new layer and we call this layer puddle. And remember, I'm getting that name by just looking here at what the layer is called. You use layer puddle, so I'm just going to copy that exact name here, and then it'll pop up here. And I'll go ahead and make some information for it. Go ahead and hit save. Now I can go ahead and actually paint puddles in here. So if I go ahead and paint this area, that will go ahead and create a puddle. And you can see that it is pretty much the same as a normal layer, except that I have set up little, wave animations and water animations here. And so the actual settings for how the puddle looks can be found under the puddle/ice layer here, which kind of doubles as if you want to replace the textures for the puddle and make them ice instead. You can use the same layer for that. It's kind of like a water-based layer for your landscape. So we could change our puddle size, speed, and strength. What I usually do is come over to the layer puddle control here and maybe add a little brightness to it, or so we could adjust the color here to match our sand a little bit better here. All right, so that's the basics of setting up landscape layers using the Aziel Arts material. As you can see, it's very modular, so you can use up to 6 landscape layers plus a puddle layer, and you can use it with slope or not. And you can also replace the layer textures as you see fit. So hopefully you found this helpful. I will see you in the next one.